Namid had been standing on that wooden auction block for 7 days under the territory's sun, 7 days hearing the same question over and over. Can she have children? No, sir. And then they would walk away. They always walked away. Ranchers needed women who could give them heirs. Merchants wanted maidservants who would someday multiply their investment. In the West of 1875, a barren woman was worth nothing. The slave trader, a fat man named Hutchins, chewed tobacco and spat on the ground every time someone asked about Namid. Pure-blood Apache, he would say in a bored voice. Strong, knows how to cook, sew, work leather, 20 years old, good teeth. Then came the inevitable question and the answer that ruined everything. Namid kept her gaze fixed on the horizon. She had learned not to look buyers in the eye. In her tribe, before the soldiers came, she had been Namid the star dancer. Now she was just the barren Apache. On the 8th day it began like the others. Hutchins arrived with his coffee and his bad mood. That morning they sold other slaves, a man for the mines, a woman for a house in town. Namid was left alone on the block, then she saw him. A tall cowboy was walking across the square, a worn gray hat, denim shirt, boots with spurs. He wore a red bandana around his neck, covered in dust. His face was tanned by the sun. He looked about 35. And stopped in front of the saloon, tied his horse, and looked around. His eyes landed on Namid. To her surprise, the cowboy walked straight toward the block. How much? He asked bluntly. Hutchins straightened up, surprised. $100, but I must warn you, she can't. Does she know how to work with horses? The cowboy interrupted, looking at Namid. She nodded. In her tribe, she had raised wild foals. Can she lift a saddle? Another nod. Afraid of hard work? Namid looked him in the eye. No, sir. The cowboy pulled out a roll of bills, counted out exactly $100, and put them in Hutchins' hand. But, sir, the trader insisted. You should know she can't give you children. She's barren, that's why no one wants her. I don't want children, the cowboy said firmly. I want someone to work my ranch, someone who won't run away, someone who knows this land. He turned to Namid. My name is BC. I have a ranch 3 days from here toward the mountains. 150 head of cattle, 20 horses. I work from dawn until dusk. The food is simple, but there's enough. You'll have your own room. He paused. I didn't buy you to be my wife or give me heirs. I bought you because I need help. No one can run a ranch alone, understand. Namid felt something strange in her chest, something she hadn't felt in months. Relief, surprise. Yes, sir, she answered. BC extended his hand to help her down from the block. Namid took it, feeling the calluses from years of work. Don't call me sir, BC said as they walked toward his horse. On my ranch, partners don't call each other sir. Partners? Namid asked, confused. BC stopped and looked at her. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes, loneliness, the same loneliness she carried inside. Someone has to help me keep that place alive, he said. It could be your home if you want it to be. He mounted his horse and offered her his hand again. Namid took it and climbed up behind him. As they rode away from the square, she looked back once. Hutchins watched them, his mouth hanging open. Why me? Namid asked after a while. There were others younger who can have children. BC didn't answer immediately. They rode in silence for several minutes. 3 years ago, he finally said, my wife and daughter died of fever. I lost them both in 1 week. His voice was flat, emotionless, as if he had told the story so many times it no longer hurt. But Namid knew it did hurt. It always hurt. After that, everyone in town looked at me with pity. Women brought me food, men patted me on the shoulder. Everyone wanted me to remarry, have more children, move on. He adjusted his hat. But I don't want to move on that way. I don't want to replace them. I just want to work my land and live in peace. Namid understood. She didn't want to be anyone's replacement either. She didn't want to be seen as a baby-making machine. She just wanted a place to belong. When Hutchins said you couldn't have children, BC continued, I saw an opportunity. I saw someone who also wanted something different, someone I wouldn't have to explain myself to about why I don't want a traditional family. So I'm not your slave, Namid said slowly. You're my partner, BC completed. We'll work together. We'll share the profits when we sell the cattle. You'll have your space, I'll have mine, and no one will bother us with questions about marriage or heirs. Namid felt something inside her relax for the first time in months, maybe years. There's one condition, BC added. If after a year you want to leave, you're free to do so. I'll give you your share of the profits and a horse, no questions asked. Why would you do that? BC shrugged. Because no one should be trapped somewhere they don't want to be. I've seen enough suffering. The road stretched ahead of them, long and dusty, but for the first time Namid felt no fear of the future. I accept, she simply said. BC nodded. Then welcome to the 2 Stars Ranch. 2 Stars? My daughter's name was Estella Star, and you're the star dancer, aren't you? Hutchins mentioned your Apache name. Namid felt a lump in her throat. It was the first time in months someone had used her true meaning. Yes, she whispered. That's what my name means. Then it's perfect, said BC. 2 stars for a new beginning. They rode toward the mountains as the sun began to set. The journey took 3 full days. BC didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried weight. He explained the ranch, the horses, the daily routines. The water comes from the creek to the east, he said as they rode. It never dries up, not even in summer. That's why I bought this land 8 years ago. Namid listened attentively. Every detail was important. Each piece of information brought her closer to understanding her new home. At night, they camped under the stars. BC always gave her the thickest blanket, always made sure she ate first. They weren't romantic gestures, they were gestures of respect, and to Namid that was worth more than any pretty words. On the third day at noon they reached a hill. BC stopped his horse. "There it is," he said, pointing downward. Namid looked. The ranch spread out in a green valley between two hills. Two-story wooden house stood in the center. Beside it was a large barn, a corral, and several smaller buildings. The creek BC had mentioned sparkled in the sun. It was beautiful, more beautiful than Namid had imagined. "The house needs repairs," BC said as they rode down the hill. "The kitchen roof leaks when it rains. Some windows are broken. I haven't had time to fix them." When they reached the ranch, the horses in the corral neighed. They were beautiful animals, bays, roans, a couple of wild mustangs. BC dismounted and helped Namid down. Her legs were numb after 3 days of travel. "Come," said BC, "I'll show you your room." They entered the house. It smelled of old wood and loneliness. The living room was clean but austere. A table, some chairs, an iron stove, bare walls. BC went up the stairs. Namid followed him. There were 4 doors in the upper hallway. "That's my room," he said, pointing to the first door. That one stays closed," he corrected, pointing to the second. His daughter's room, Namid guessed. He opened the third door. "This is yours." The room was small but bright, a bed with a straw mattress, a table, a chair, a window facing east, clean and simple. "It's not much," said BC. "It's perfect," Namid answered honestly. It was the first room she had had all to herself since the soldiers destroyed her tribe. BC nodded. "Rest today, tomorrow we start work." But Namid shook her head. "I want to start now, I want to learn." BC looked at her with surprise, then with something that seemed like respect. "All right then, come, I'll show you the horses." They spent the rest of the day in the barn. BC introduced each horse by name. He explained their temperaments, their habits, their quirks. "This is Thunder," he said, stroking a black stallion. "He's the most difficult, doesn't like strangers riding him." Namid approached slowly, extending her hand to let Thunder smell her. Then she began to hum softly an old Apache song her mother had taught her. Thunder moved his ears, came closer, let Namid touch his neck. BC watched in silence, his eyes wide. "How did you do that?" he finally asked. "Horses understand the heart," Namid said simply, "not the words." They continued with the other horses. Namid learned quickly, remembering everything. BC realized he had made a good choice. She didn't just know how to work with horses, she understood them. At sunset, BC prepared dinner, dried meat, beans, hard bread. They ate in silence at the kitchen table. "Tomorrow we'll check on the cattle," BC said. "They're scattered in the hills. We have to count them, make sure none are sick or injured." "How long will it take?" Namid asked. 3 or 4 days if we do it right," Namid nodded. "And after we need to fix the fences, then prepare the hay for winter, then brand some horses, then..." BC stopped and smiled slightly. "The work never ends on a ranch." "Good," said Namid. "I don't like being idle." They finished eating. Namid washed the dishes while BC checked his tools for the next day. "Namid," BC said suddenly. She turned. "Thank you." "For what?" "For coming, for accepting this. I know it's not an easy life." Namid looked him straight in the eye. "No life is easy, but at least this one is mine to choose." BC nodded slowly. "Yes, I suppose you're right." That night Namid lay down in her new bed. The window was open and she could hear the sound of the creek, the wind in the trees, the occasional neigh of the horses. For the first time in years she felt safe. But just before falling asleep she heard something else, a soft sound coming from BC's room. At first she didn't recognize it, then she realized. He was crying. Namid didn't move, didn't go to comfort him. She knew that some pain needs to be cried out in private, some memories need to be honored alone. She had cried like that too when she lost her family, when the soldiers massacred her tribe, when she was captured and sold like livestock. But now, lying in that small room, she felt something different. It wasn't exactly happiness, it was deeper, it was purpose. BC had given her more than a roof and food. He had given her dignity. He had given her a place in the world where her barrenness wasn't a curse, but simply an unimportant fact. And she, without saying a word, had done something for BC too. She had given him a reason to keep going, one that didn't involve forgetting those he had lost. 2 broken people, Namid thought as she drifted to sleep. 2 fallen stars, but together maybe we can shine again. At dawn, BC knocked on her door. "Time," he said simply. Namid got up, dressed quickly, and went downstairs. BC had 2 horses saddled and ready. "Today your new life begins," he said, handing her the reins of a mare. "Go." Namid mounted easily. "No," she said, looking at the horizon. "My new life began 3 days ago. Today we just live it." BC smiled, a real smile this time. "Then let's live it well." They rode together toward the hills, 2 shadows against the rising sun. 2 months passed. Summer turned to autumn and the leaves began to change color. Namid worked from dawn until dusk and never complained. She learned to fix fences, brand cattle, heal wounds on horses. BC taught her patiently and she absorbed every lesson like dry earth absorbs rain. But more than the work, what changed was the silence between them. It was no longer uncomfortable. It had become something comfortable, almost comforting. They could work side by side for hours without speaking, communicating only with looks and gestures. One afternoon, while repairing the barn roof, BC slipped. His foot missed the beam and he fell backward. Namid reacted instantly, grabbing his arm and pulling him forward. They both ended up sitting on the roof, breathing heavily. You saved me, BC said after a moment. Partners, Namid replied simply. We take care of each other. BC looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Yes, partners. That night during dinner, BC spoke more than usual. He told her about how he had come to the territory, about his early years struggling to establish the ranch, about hard winters and dry summers. Namid listened, but she also shared. She told him about her tribe, Apache traditions, how they had lived in harmony with the land before everything changed. My grandmother used to say the land doesn't belong to us, Namid said. We belong to the land. That's a wise way to see it, BC replied. I wish more people thought that way. The days grew shorter, the nights colder. BC began preparing for winter, storing provisions, making sure the barn was well insulated. One morning, Namid woke up and found BC standing in front of the closed room, the one that had been his daughter's. His hand was on the doorknob, but he wasn't turning it. BC, she said softly. He started as if he'd forgotten where he was. I was thinking, maybe it's time. Time for what? To open this door, to let the light in again. Namid approached slowly. You don't have to do it alone. BC looked at her. His eyes were wet. Would you come with me? Yes. Together, they opened the door. The room was exactly as she had left it 3 years ago. A small bed with a pink quilt, toys in a chest, drawings on the walls. BC entered slowly, touching each object with reverence. Stella loved horses, he said, his voice breaking. She wanted to be a cowgirl like her papa. Namid said nothing, just stood there present. She was 7 years old, BC continued. So full of life, laughed all the time, and then, in just 1 week, his voice broke completely. Namid placed her hand on BC's shoulder. It wasn't a romantic gesture, it was a gesture of deep understanding between two people who had lost everything. My mother died in my arms, Namid said softly. The soldiers had burned our camp. She told me to run, but I couldn't leave her. She died before I could say a proper goodbye. BC turned toward her. For the first time he really saw her, not as his employee or his work partner, but as someone who understood his pain because she had walked through that same dark valley. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry too, Namid replied. They stood in silence for a long while, two wounded souls sharing a moment of truth. Finally, BC spoke. I want to show you something. They left the house and walked toward the barn. BC entered a side room Namid had never seen. It was a small workshop full of wood-carving tools. This was my hobby, BC explained. Before. There were wooden figures everywhere, horses, birds, trees, all beautifully carved. BC took a wooden box from the top shelf and carefully opened it. Inside was a carved star, perfectly detailed, the size of her palm. I was making this for Estella, he said. For her 8th birthday, I never finished it. He looked at Namid. I want to give it to you. Not as a replacement for anything, but as a symbol of our agreement. 2 stars ranch, 2 stars. Namid took the carved star. It was beautiful, made with infinite love and care. She felt the weight of what BC was sharing with her. It wasn't just a piece of wood, it was a part of his heart. I can't accept this, Namid said. It was Estella's. No, BC said firmly. Estella is gone, but her memory can live in different ways. Keep it if you treasure it, then she remains part of this ranch, part of our family of 2. Namid felt tears in her eyes. Family of 2, she repeated. Yes, said BC. I know we said partners, and we are, but we're also more than that. We're 2 people who saved each other from loneliness. That's family, even if it's not traditional. Namid closed her fingers around the star. Then I will take care of it, like I take care of everything important on this ranch. BC nodded. Took another box. Inside were leatherworking tools. Teach me something from your culture, how your people made crafts. We could work together on winter nights. Namid was surprised. No one had ever asked her to share her Apache heritage before. Most people wanted her to forget it, to assimilate. You really want to learn, she asked. Yes, said BC. I want to understand where you come from. I want this ranch to be a place where both cultures can exist, where we can both be ourselves. Namid felt something warm in her chest. It wasn't romantic love, it was something deeper. It was acceptance, respect, the feeling of finally finding a place where she could be completely herself. I'll teach you, she promised, and you'll teach me more about wood carving. Deal, said BC, extending his hand. Namid shook it, but this time the handshake lasted a little longer. This time it was more than a business agreement. It was the beginning of something new, something neither of them had words for yet. That night Namid placed the carved star on the table beside her bed. Moonlight made it glow softly, and for the first time since arriving at the ranch, Namid smiled before falling asleep. Winter came early that year. The first snowfall covered the ranch in mid-November. BC and Namid worked together to ensure the animals were protected and there was enough food stored. The nights were long and cold. After dinner, they would sit by the stove. BC would carve wood while Namid taught him to make bead bracelets and work leather, according to Apache traditions. My grandmother used to say each bead tells a story, Namid explained as her fingers worked skillfully. Blue is the sky, red is the earth, white is peace. BC listened attentively, his large, rough hands trying to mimic Namid's delicate movements. He wasn't very good at first, but he persisted. You're patient with me, he said one night. You were patient with me when you taught me about the ranch, Namid replied. It's only fair. Weeks passed, the snow piled higher. Some days they couldn't leave the house, but they never felt trapped. There was always something to do, something to repair, something to create. BC began carving something new. He worked on it every night, but always hid it when Namid got too close. What are you making? She would ask curiously. It's a surprise, BC would reply with a mysterious smile. Namid also had her own secret project. During the hours BC spent in the barn, she worked on something special. Using techniques her mother had taught her, techniques she hadn't practiced in years. December arrived. BC announced they needed to go to town before the snow got worse. They needed supplies they couldn't make or grow themselves: salt, sugar, oil, ammunition. The trip to town took a full day. When they arrived, people looked at them curiously. An Apache woman and a widowed cowboy working together. It was unusual. At the general store, the owner, a man named Patterson, served them with cold politeness. BC, he said with a nod. And Miss Namid, she corrected firmly. My name is Namid. Patterson blinked, surprised by her direct tone. Namid, then, what do you need today? While BC listed the supplies, Namid walked around the store. There were things she hadn't seen in years: colorful fabrics, books, specialized tools. Her eyes stopped on something particular: a box of paints and brushes. Estella had drawn on the walls of her room. These materials could help preserve those drawings. Namid looked at the price. She had no money of her own. BC had told her they would share the profits from the cattle sale in spring, but that was months away. BC appeared beside her. See something you want? Namid shook her head. No, it's fine. But BC had seen what she was looking at. He said nothing. After loading the supplies, BC told her, I have one more stop to make. Wait for me at the saloon. Order something hot to drink. Namid nodded, though the idea of entering the saloon alone made her nervous, but BC trusted she could do it. Inside the saloon, the warmth was welcome. Namid ordered coffee and sat at a corner table. Some men looked at her, but no one approached. Then a woman sat down across from her. She was older, maybe 60, with gray hair pulled up in a bun. You're the one living with BC at the ranch, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. My name is Marta. I was a friend of BC's wife, Clara. Good woman. Shame what happened. Namid didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. People talk, Marta continued. They say it's strange, a white man and an Apache woman living together. We're partners, Namid said firmly. We work the ranch together. Marta studied her for a long moment, then smiled. I think you're good for him. BC was dying inside after losing his family. Now when he comes to town, I see something different in his eyes. Hope maybe. He's good for me too, Namid admitted. Marta leaned forward. Take care of each other. The world can be hard on those who are different, but those who are different often see things others can't. Before Namid could respond, BC entered. He carried a wrapped package under his arm. Ready? He asked. Namid said goodbye to Marta and they left. The trip back was quiet. Snow was beginning to fall again. That night after dinner, BC placed the wrapped package on the table. It's almost Christmas, he said. I know your people don't celebrate this holiday, but I want to give you something. Namid opened the package slowly. Inside was the box of paints and brushes she had seen at the store, but there was something else, a beautifully made leather sketchbook. I thought maybe you could use the paints to preserve Estella's drawings, BC explained, and the sketchbook. Thought you might want to draw your own stories too, the stories of your people. Namid felt a lump in her throat. BC, this is too much. No, he said firmly. It's not enough. It will never be enough to thank you for everything you've done, for bringing life back to this ranch, for helping me remember that life is worth living. Namid blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. I have something for you too. She went up to her room and returned with her own package. She placed it in front of BC. He opened it carefully. Inside was a leather vest, completely handmade. It was decorated with beads in traditional Apache patterns. In the center, embroidered with colored threads, was a star, but it wasn't an ordinary vest. Namid had sewn a special pocket inside. Inside the pocket were two small portraits she had found in Estella's room, one of Clara and one of Estella. So you always carry your family close to your heart, Namid said softly, but also to protect you from the cold. Because your family would want you to be safe and warm. BC took the vest with trembling hands. He discovered the secret pocket and the portraits, his eyes filled with tears. Namid, this is, his voice broke. No one has ever given me something so meaningful. He put on the vest. It fit perfectly. Namid had measured carefully, watching his movements for weeks to get the size right. BC stood up and looked at himself in the small living room mirror. Then he turned to Namid. Thank you, he said simply, but in those two words there was a world of emotion. Gifts in my culture aren't just objects, Namid explained. They are promises. This vest is my promise that I will always take care of you as you take care of me. BC nodded, unable to speak. They stood like that for a long moment, two people who had found in each other something the world had denied them, complete acceptance. Outside, the snow fell silently, covering the ranch with a white blanket. But inside the house there was warmth, not just from the fire in the stove, but from the bond that had formed between two souls who had saved each other. Merry Christmas, Namid, BC finally said. Merry Christmas, BC, she replied. And in that moment they both knew they had found something more precious than gold. They had found a home. Spring came slowly, melting the snow and bringing new life to the ranch. The horses were restless, ready to run after the long winter. The cattle had survived well thanks to BC and Namid's care. It was time to sell some of the cattle. BC and Namid spent 2 weeks gathering the cows, selecting the best ones to take to market. This year we have more cattle than ever, BC said one morning as they counted the heads. 180 head, that's a good number. We work well together, Namid replied. BC looked at her. Yes, we do. The trip to the cattle market took a week. They sold 120 head at a good price. When the buyer counted out the money, BC immediately divided the amount into 2 equal parts. Your half, he said, handing her a roll of bills. Namid looked at the money in her hands. It was the first time in her life she had money of her own, money she had earned with her work, not money given to her out of pity. This is, she began. Yours, BC interrupted. You earned every cent. Namid counted the money, $600. A fortune for someone who had been sold for $100 just a year ago. That night they camped near the market. BC made coffee while Namid looked at the stars. What are you thinking about? BC asked. That a year ago I was standing on an auction block, Namid said. No hope, no future, and now I have money in my pocket and a home to return to. BC sat down beside her. A year ago I was alone on that ranch, waiting to die slowly. And now I have a reason to get up every morning. They sat in silence, watching the fire. Namid, BC said finally, there's something I need to tell you, something important. She turned toward him, waiting. BC pulled out an envelope from his pocket. I went to see a lawyer last week when you thought I was in town buying supplies. Namid felt a knot in her stomach. What could this mean? BC handed her the envelope. Open it. With trembling hands, Namid opened the envelope. Inside were several legal documents. Her eyes moved over the words, trying to understand. I don't understand all of this, she admitted. There are 3 documents, BC explained. The first is your official certificate of freedom. You are no longer a slave under any law. You are a free woman. Namid felt tears in her eyes. But you already freed me. That was Hatchin's paper, said BC. This is different. This says that no one can ever claim you as property, not even if something happens to me. Namid nodded, unable to speak. The second document, BC continued, is the deed to the Two Stars Ranch. It says you are a co-owner. Half the ranch is legally yours. Namid dropped the papers. What? We said we were partners, BC said firmly. Partners share everything equally. The land, the animals, the profits, the debts, everything. But BC, this is too much. I did nothing to deserve. You did everything, BC interrupted. You saved that ranch. You saved it from becoming a graveyard of memories. You made it a home again. Namid looked at the documents in disbelief. Her name was written there, Namid, co-owner of the Two Stars Ranch. There's a third document, BC said softly. Namid took it with trembling hands. It was shorter than the others. She read it once, then again. She couldn't believe what it said. This document says that if something happens to me, BC explained, the whole ranch is yours, the horses, the cattle, the land, the house, everything. And it also says that if something happens to you, everything is mine. We are mutual heirs. Why would you do this? Namid whispered. BC looked her directly in the eyes. Because you are my family, not by blood, not by marriage, but family nonetheless. And family takes care of each other. Family makes sure the other is protected. Namid felt tears streaming down her cheeks. No one had ever considered her family before. Not even when, I know, said BC softly, but I do. From the day you tamed thunder with just a song, from the night we opened Estella's room together, from every shared meal and every repaired fence and every moment of comfortable silence, you are my family. Namid hugged him. It was a spontaneous hug, full of gratitude and emotion. BC tensed for a moment, surprised. Then he returned. Thank you, Namid whispered. Thank you for seeing me as a person, for giving me dignity, for making me part of something. Thank you, BC replied, for reminding me that life goes on, that love doesn't end with death, it only changes form. They pulled apart, both wiping their eyes. So, said BC, what will you do with your money, your freedom, and your land? Namid thought for a moment. I want to buy more horses, good horses. I want the Two Stars Ranch to be known for raising the best horses in the territory. BC smiled. That's a good idea. Anything else? I want to build something, Namid said slowly. A guest room, for when Marta comes to visit, for when we find others who need a safe place. Others like us, asked BC. Yes, others who don't fit in anywhere else, others who need a home where they can be themselves. BC's smile grew. I like that idea. Two Stars Ranch can be more than just a ranch. It can be a refuge, exactly, said Namid. They spent the rest of the night making plans. They talked about which horses to buy, how to expand the barn, when to start building the new room. When they finally fell asleep under the stars, both felt at peace. The next day they began the journey back to the ranch, but now it was different. It was no longer BC's ranch where Namid worked. It was their ranch, their shared home. When they arrived and saw the house in the valley, Namid felt something she had never felt before. Pride, belonging, love for a place that was truly hers. Welcome home, partner, BC said with a smile. Welcome home, partner, Namid replied. They dismounted and walked together toward the house. Thunder neighed from the corral as if greeting them. We have a lot of work to do, said BC. There's always a lot of work, Namid replied, but now we do it together, as family. BC placed his hand on Namid's shoulder, as family. And so 2 fallen stars found their place in the sky. They did not shine alone but together, 2 lights in the darkness, guiding each other home. The Two Stars Ranch prospered over the years. It became a place known not only for its excellent horses but for something more important. It became a place where the rejected found acceptance, where the broken found healing, where the lost found a home. And it all began with a cowboy who said, I don't want children, I want you, and an Apache woman who finally found where she belonged.